Good afternoon, and welcome to the Future of Diplomacy Project's event on tackling major humanitarian crises in the time of COVID-19. My name is Aoibheann Thinnes, and I am a second-year Master in Public Policy student here at the Harvard Kennedy School. At HKS, I serve as co-chair of the student organization Women in Defense, Diplomacy, and Development, W3D. Before we begin, we invite you to keep your video on and raise a virtual hand to ask a question during the Q&A portion. Also, be aware that this session is being recorded, that your image may appear in the recording, and that we may post this video to the Belfer Center's website. While this virtual event is on the record, the event organizers prohibit any attendees, including journalists, from audiovisual recording or distributing parts or all of the event program without prior written authorization. It is now my pleasure to welcome Henrietta Fore, Executive Director of UNICEF, virtually to the Kennedy School. Henrietta Fore became UNICEF's 7th Executive Director on January 1st, 2018. Previously, from 2007 to 2009, Ms. Fore served as the Administrator of the U.S. Agency for International Development and Director of United States Foreign Assistance, and was the first woman to serve in both of these roles. From 2005 to 2007, Ms. Fore served as the Undersecretary of State for Management, and from 2001 to 2005, Ms. Fore was the 37th Director of the United States Mint in the U.S. Department of Treasury. Immediately prior to her appointment with UNICEF, Ms. Fore was chairman of the board and chief executive officer of Holzman International, a manufacturing and investment company. Ms. Fore has worked to champion economic development, education, health, humanitarian assistance, and disaster relief in a public service, private sector, and nonprofit leadership career that spans more than 4 decades, and we are honored to welcome her here today. Professor Nicholas Burns will be moderating this discussion. Professor Burns is the faculty chair of the Future of Diplomacy Project and the Goodman Family Professor of the Practice of Diplomacy and International Relations at the Harvard Kennedy School. And with that, I pass it to you, Professor Burns.
Aoibheann, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. And Aoibheann, thank you for that very kind introduction to my friend, Henrietta Fore. Aoibheann and Izzy Ernst, and Izzy's here, are co-chairing this year our W3D program, which I think is one of the most important programs that we have here at the Kennedy School, which encourages our female students to become leaders in defense and diplomacy and development. And they will become leaders, and they have a great role model, in my judgment, in Henrietta Fore. So Aoibheann, thank you very much. Thanks to the Future of Diplomacy Project. Erica Meneselis organized this event. I want to thank Erica. She's going to be asking some of the questions. I want to thank Catherine Kluver Ashbrook, who's here. I want to thank our friend Matt Keating, who's now at Oxford University. Matt graduated virtually from Harvard College, but we'll give him a ceremony at some point. He graduated last spring, outstanding student, and my teaching assistant last year. So Matt, welcome, and Jonathan Kempner and lots of friends here. Great to see everyone. I just wanted to add to what Aoibheann said in praise of Henrietta Fore. She's someone, we're close friends. We worked together at the State Department when Henrietta was Undersecretary for Management, and I was her partner on the political side of the department. And we worked on lots of different projects together. And I have great memories of working with her. I learned from her. I learned from her how to be a good manager. I learned how to put people first in a big bureaucracy, which is what we had, a big bureaucracy, but Henrietta did that. And I've really admired the career that Aoibheann talked about. All these leadership roles, smashing of glass ceilings in several different US cabinet agencies, which is what we need to do more of in the US government. I admire the fact that she's a business leader and that she has such a strong sense of public service. It would be easy for her not to continue taking really difficult jobs and sacrificing a lot. But she answers that call to service every time that it's given. And so I think she's a good role model for all of our students, male and female alike. And what we thought we'd do today is welcome her. Erica and I are going to interview her. We have questions prepared just to give everybody a sense of what UNICEF does, which it's an extraordinary UN agency, and the breadth and depth of what it's doing for children around the world and for humanity around the world. And then we're going to open it up and give you all a chance to ask questions of yourselves. We'll have a really good discussion. But first, Henrietta, welcome. So good to see you back at Harvard. And Henrietta, I think your screen might be frozen. I think it is. Can you hear us, Henrietta? Okay, I'm sure that Henrietta will work out this issue. In the meantime, I'm going to filibuster and just say welcome to all of you. What could we talk about today once we get Henrietta back with us? When she and I spoke a couple of weeks ago, I thought I knew something about UNICEF, didn't realize just how, I think she's going to recycle back to us, just how broad and deep this institution is. A multi-billion-dollar institution, the greatest purveyor of assistance to children around the world, involved in health issues for children, involved in child poverty in every corner of the world. And so you truly have to admire that mission. It's generally considered to be one of the better run UN agencies. And that's important in an institution that's had some challenges on management. And Henrietta, you're back with us.
I am, thank you. I missed those very wise and perceptive comments, Nick, please forgive me.
Well, actually, we were just continuing to praise you in your absence. And I was just saying, Henrietta, in addition to your role as a leader in the United States government and now at the United Nations, I was struck when we were speaking a couple of weeks ago about how pervasive the influence of UNICEF is around the world and how deeply involved you are. I mean, you're involved in Myanmar, the crisis there right now. You're involved in Tigray, massive humanitarian violations underway. I've been really pleased to see, I should say, our Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, speaking out this week, but also practicing some quiet diplomacy with the Ethiopian and Eritrean authorities to try to resolve this crisis. You've been involved in Yemen. A lot of people say it's the worst humanitarian crisis in the world now. You've been involved in Syria with the millions of Syrians displaced. So you need a lot of intestinal fortitude for this job, obviously, but you also need someone who can execute, who's a manager, and who's a humanitarian, which is what you are. And I thought, Henrietta, as we start this conversation, before we get into these issues, you've had a remarkable life of private sector leadership and public sector leadership. I think it's always interesting to hear from our students and for people like me, how did you start in this path? What encouraged you to think about becoming a leader publicly? And welcome.
Thank you very much, Nick. And it's great to see you again. And I loved working with you. So those of you who have Nick as a professor and as a friend and as a mentor, you are very fortunate. Listen to every word. You're going to cherish it for decades to come. So he's great. So let's see. For me, I always wanted to make the world a better place. I have a Swiss mother, and therefore I always sort of had one foot out in the international world, that I knew there was a world outside of my hometown in the United States. And so I wanted to see the world and be part of it and understand the cultures, and that it may be the reason that many of you are following the area of diplomacy, development, defense. It's a very interesting field for anyone who wants to make the world a better place, because you can. And as you know from Nick Burns, he has done so as a diplomat, and you can do so as a diplomat, or in development, or in business, or in nonprofits. So, so Nick, I think it comes from inside that we want to change the world and we want to make it better. And to me, public service is really just about serving. You're there to serve the common good. I didn't know if I could be or would be a leader, but I at least was going to be a contributor. So whenever anybody asked me if I would do something, I said yes, and figured out how we'd do it. So on you go.
Thank you very much. And of course, you came to the UNICEF job, Henrietta, with a lot of experience in development. You directed USAID, you directed the Millennium Challenge. You'd worked in other positions in USAID. You'd worked in the Treasury Department. When we spoke a couple of weeks ago by phone, I told the group, I thought I knew what UNICEF was about. And in fact, I think UNICEF was my first understanding that there was a United Nations when I was 6, 7, 8 years old. Growing up outside of Boston, we collected in our grammar school, pennies and nickels and dimes for UNICEF. And it was a big cause in the United States. And I think it might have been the best known UN agency back in the 1960s in the United States. But I was amazed by what you told me about the budget, about the breadth and depth of what you're doing around the world. Can you give us a sense of your purview of what UNICEF does and where you're doing it?
I can, Nick. And Nick, we should at some point also talk about what the difference is among these different sectors, how the private sector is different from bilateral assistance that you and I lived in and multilateral world. So let me tell you about UNICEF. So UNICEF is $7 billion in our budgets. We raise it every year. 2/3 comes from governments and 1/3 comes from private individuals. And many of them are individuals just like you, Nick, when you were maybe collecting some pennies and nickels on the kitchen table. Lots of families give to us. And so about 110 million people donate to UNICEF all around the world. And it makes it a very interesting agency. We get no funding from the United Nations Secretariat itself. So we have to raise this money each year. And as the executive director of UNICEF, you wear two hats. One hat is that you sit on the senior management team for the Secretary General of the United Nations. And the United Nations, as you know, has an extraordinarily wide purview of respecting human rights. And it is charged by many national governments with bringing peace. So, Nick, to your earlier comment about Yemen and Syria and Ethiopia and Myanmar, there are special representatives from the Secretary General in all of these countries. There are negotiators, and they are hard at work. So one hat that I wear is that of being on the Secretary General's senior staff. My other hat is to run the agency UNICEF, and that is the one that we are just talking about. And so the areas we work in are nutrition, health, education, water, sanitation, and protection. We are in every country in the world, which makes us a very broad footprint. We are in our what is called a mandate. We are both in humanitarian emergencies and we are in development, so longer term assistance. That is unique among United Nations agencies, and it's a very interesting type of an organization to run. We have enormous supply chains, and our current puzzle is how to get vaccines out to the entire developing world. So we are the chief procurement house for the COVID-19 vaccines. And it's because we have been the chief procurer of routine childhood immunizations. We have about 2 billion a year of vaccines that we send out for children. And now we are doubling that this year and another 2 billion in COVID vaccines. So we procure these, we send them out to the countries. So we have a big logistics and freight hub. It is located in Copenhagen. It is the largest supply center in the world for the United Nations. And we are hard at work in every country to make sure that they can accept the vaccines, that they can get them onto trucks, that there's a cold chain system, that we have trained the healthcare workers in how to use these, that there are syringes bundled with them and safety boxes to put them in, and that we are getting communications out in every language that vaccines are safe and that you should come in and be vaccinated. So it's like a business. It's like a government, it's like a bilateral agency, but it is a multilateral agency and it lies within the United Nations. Very interesting mix. And children, in our definition, is anyone 18 and below, but we also have projects for young people that go up to the age of 24.
Henrietta, President Biden said the day before yesterday that we will likely have a sufficient number of vaccines so that the entire adult population of the United States might be inoculated, vaccinated, excuse me, by the end of May. What does it look like for the developing world? I would assume that this vaccination program is going to go well into 2022, but at what point will we have sufficient number of vaccines available and in the arms of little kids around the world?
It's a real challenge. I mean, this is a massive undertaking that the world is doing. We are not yet set up as a world to move vaccines globally with a triage system about who gets the vaccines first and how they are gathered and distributed. But COVAX is doing its best to try to be that central point that can allocate and can send vaccines to the poorest countries, so the low and the lower middle income countries. And we have now about 85 that we consider the most important to do, but we are aiming at getting 100 countries vaccines in the first 100 days here. So this week alone, we have about 36 countries that are receiving vaccines, many of them in sub-Saharan Africa, but they are in all parts of the world. And there are two parts to it, Nick. One is out of COVAX, the countries that are the least developed, but there's also vaccines that are moving, that are purchased privately, but they're moving at the same time. And for others, they are moving under World Bank funding. So there's several streams of vaccines. We are hoping that in this first group that's going out in March, that we will be able to reach the healthcare workers, the frontline workers that need them, at least the early 3%. We hope that we can get countries to the 20% level this year. That is not the same levels as the developed countries. So making sure that these countries have access to vaccines, that they have plans, that they have the ability to distribute them, that they have trained workforces, is going to be exceedingly important. One area that's been affected strongly, Nick, is the healthcare workers themselves. So many healthcare workers have retrained. They've been doing polio or they've been doing routine childhood vaccinations, but now they're doing COVID. But we need lots of young people to now train as healthcare workers. So we're trying to get lots of young people into training programs, whether they're online or whether they're in person, because we need a workforce. And to get these vaccines out, there needs to be community trust that you do take a vaccine, that you actually are vaccinated.
So Henrietta, will there be sufficient funds from the major countries, the wealthy countries of the world, so that COVAX can actually achieve its mission? I know President Trump obviously refused to join COVAX, but now the United States has joined and contributed several $billions in support to President Biden. Are we seeing that input from China, from the EU, from Japan, from countries, Norway, that have the resources, the United Arab Emirates?
So the Europeans and the Nordics have really been strong in this. The United States under President Biden has come in strongly. So the Gavi and the COVAX facility is starting to get funding now. And with the supplemental that's come off of the House side, there is hope that there might be more. From what we see, the greatest need we have is the countries themselves. The healthcare systems are fragile and they really need strengthening. So for some of these countries, some of the therapeutics and the other facilities that you need around vaccines are very, very fragile. So there aren't enough masks and gowns. There aren't oxygen concentrators. There aren't pharmaceuticals that can help. But all of these things need to be in place. In sub-Saharan Africa, there is often not a running water and a bar of soap in a community health clinic or at a school or in a household. So it is hard to contain the virus, and it is essential that all of these multi-sectoral approaches be part of how we roll out in countries. So what the United States is now giving and pledged is enormously important for the developing countries, and it will create friends and memories and lives for the future.
I'm sure you're going to have a lot of questions from our students on this, so I won't press the point further because I think we'll have a full discussion of this. But I wanted to ask one more question, then ask Erica Meneselis to ask a few questions as well. I wanted to ask how difficult it must be to work in a war zone. You're working in the DRC, where you've got 3 million children at risk of poverty, and that's a war zone, and Yemen with the cholera outbreak and the indiscriminate bombing of civilian areas, and Syria with its 12 million homeless at one point, more than half the population of the country. What are your networks like? Are you working through local agencies, nonprofits, and relief organizations as opposed to having a major well-fielded team that does that? How do you pull this off?
So UNICEF, about 60% of our funds go to local organizations. And this is very helpful because they're there before, during, and after whatever crises there are. And these organizations, many of them are women-led. Many of them have women who are part of them. But one of the real issues now is the safety of these humanitarian workers. There used to be a time in decades past when a humanitarian worker coming with a United Nations shirt or hat was accorded safe passage. It's no longer true. There are so many non-state actors who stop a convoy, who kidnap a nurse or a doctor. Everyone has a security concern now who's out there working in these war and conflict zones. So some are hot wars, some are warm wars, some are neighborhood conflicts, but they all create real difficulties for the humanitarian workers. And as you all know, humanitarian workers cross lines. They do not differentiate. So we're there for every child. We're not there just for some child or one child who's politically on one side or another of a line. But it means that our people and our supplies need to get through these lines. And so there are often checkpoints. We have to keep our supplies safe. It cannot be looted on its way through to a town or a village where we need to get it. We need our people to get clearances, and often that is difficult because the host country government does not give you clearance to go into some of these areas. We talk on all sides of the conflict. So Nick, when you and I are working in a bilateral entity, we talk to the people who our country, our nation talks with. When you're in a multilateral agency, you talk to everyone. So we will get clearance from any local actor to move in their territory. So we will get clearance. We have to negotiate clearance. So all of these negotiations that you all are learning in Professor Burns's class, very important. You can use it as a humanitarian.
Thank you. In fact, the Italian ambassador to the DRC was assassinated last week.
Yes.
And he was on a humanitarian mission.
Yes.
So it just speaks to the point you just made about the danger to all of you in this field. Erica, I know you have a couple of questions for Henrietta Fore.
Sure. So speaking about the DRC and what you mentioned about the massive global vaccine campaign, we know that other humanitarian crises continue throughout this COVID-19 pandemic. So can you describe how the pandemic has exacerbated the situation of conflict and disaster affected children around the world, not only the 3 million displaced children in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, but all around the world? And how do you as a leader prioritize where to direct this assistance in complex situations such as these?
So Erica, that's a very broad question. So let me try to approach it with what it's like on the ground in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So when I was there, I particularly wanted to see how we were dealing with Ebola. And Ebola is a very interesting example for COVID-19. And we have set up Ebola centers. And if you think of them as being a cross between a one-story dormitory and a village medical center, the people that are working there are fully clothed in gowns to be protected from Ebola. There are protocols with how to do this work. They are out in the villages, and a person who either believes that they have Ebola can come in to be tested. And if they are found to have it, they will be taken in, and there will be a treatment stage that will take time. So it can be anywhere between 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, depending on what treatment is needed. If they have children, they worry about leaving them. So we have creches nearby in which there are survivors of Ebola who are looking after the children of the Ebola patients that are being looked at, so that you don't have to leave your children, which you cannot, particularly as a single mother. Women are predominant in terms of who gets Ebola, because they are the ones usually that are caring for the sick, are washing the bodies and preparing them for burial. And as a result, they catch Ebola. So the whole approach of testing, of treatment, of isolation, and of tracking those who have Ebola is a very important model that we are trying to talk about everywhere in the world. It's been effective, and Ebola has been brought under control. But to your point, what happened then to all the healthcare workers? Because they're trained in Ebola, but they now need to be cross-trained. We have campaigns for polio, which is important for the Democratic Republic of Congo also. Measles, diphtheria, all of the childhood diseases. And you can lose more children to these diseases than you can to a COVID or an Ebola. So having healthcare workers who are trained, who are trusted by the community, are very important. So let me just quickly go on community trust. Nick has written articles about George Shultz and trust being the coin of the realm. Trust in a community is often held by a woman, one that everyone goes to. She is the midwife. She is the one who they go to when they have problems in their families, when they have problems with needing some income, if they have problems in growing food. You have to have the trust of that woman who leads as a leader in the village, and who backs the idea of immunizations or healthcare. If she believes it, if the village elders believe it, that village is willing to accept it. If they do not accept help. And that has happened to us in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So there are pockets of villages that do not accept help. And because it is also a conflict zone with Mai Mai and other actors, it's a very complex situation for the local villagers on who to trust. And they do not always trust Western medicine or those who are outside of the village who bring in and look like they're in moon space suits. You know, it's very difficult. So the challenge worldwide is that an organization like UNICEF carry local trust, and that we have the capacity and the people to deliver, to help children all over the world. And that is an enormous undertaking. It is extremely important. And I think in the decades to come, it's going to be one of the most important things that all of you can carry out there in the world.
Great, thank you. I have one more question. It's sort of also a big picture question. You mentioned that 2/3 of your budget comes from governments, and the US is UNICEF's largest donor, but is the US doing enough? And how do you manage relationships with other member states who often have conflicting interests? And also, what is China's role in all of this in the international development sphere?
So thank you again, Erica, for a nice complex question. All right, so let me begin with who's on my board. So I have a board of member states, and they rotate on and off the board, and they come from geographic areas so that we are equally distributed between the regions of the world. And on my board at this moment in time, I have the United States on my board. I also have China on my board. So they are on the board, which means that they have to come to conclusions and consensus about my strategic priorities for 1 year and 4 years. Nick, we do quadrennial reviews, just as we had gotten used to in the US government. So strategic plans, the measuring of our progress and our success, very important in the United Nations and the policies involved in it. The activities that we do around the world can vary. So let me tell you about one that I had the pleasure of talking to the chair of the State and Foreign Ops, Barbara Lee, this morning. And one of the areas we were talking about is education. And I think this has the ability to be the equivalent of a PEPFAR of another administration. I think the Biden administration could be excellent on really focusing on education. And it's because of several factors. One, in COVID, we saw 1.6 billion children and young people out of school. What they need now is hybrid, online, and in-person schools. We need it in high-tech, medium-tech, low-tech, and no-tech situations. And technology now gives us lower satellites and Wi-Fi. And we could now, in the next 3 to 4 years, connect every school in the world to the internet. And that would be an extraordinary accomplishment. And wouldn't it be great if the United States said, that's what we'd like to do? Because the United States has the private companies, as well as the public love of education, that we really could be a leader in this. And with the G7 and G20 coming up, and the World Economic Forum and the World Bank meetings, this would be an ideal time. To do it, we think we need 5 areas. We need to connect every school, so we need the technology for that. We need to have the online content, and there is some great content, and it's everything from the equivalent of a Khan Academy to Harvard, teaching everything from foundational skills to occupational skills to digital skills to entrepreneurial skills. 8 out of 10 young people today are going to have to be entrepreneurs. They're going to have to make their own jobs, but we can teach all of this, and they're going to have to learn on devices. So we also need devices, and we need devices that are everything from cell phones and tablets and computers, but the world has a lot of them, and we think we could get them out there. Then we also need the ICT companies to zero rate so that you can download for free whatever your national curriculum is and whatever is educational content. And if you can, every young learner can get it, every teacher and every school can get it. And then lastly, we need to start moving some of our young people into being part-time teachers and full-time if they can, but in their communities. They're often digitally literate. You all know this, and couldn't you help 20 young people out there? If we did this all over the world, it would be enormously powerful. So right now we have 3 million volunteers. We think that could go to 20 million this year. Maybe it could go higher, but we really think that the world right now could reach every child, connect every school to the internet, and then there would be benefits for businesses, for hospitals and communications. And so could the United States do more? Back to your question, it could. And this would be one, and it's major, but it could change the world. If there was one thing you can do to change poverty, it is education. It's the best ladder we know out of poverty. It's as close as we get to a silver bullet. And this would be the time to do it, because we've woken up as a world that education isn't easy. It's hard to do at home if you're a parent struggling with young children. And we could change this for every child. And so many children right now have no access to education and they've been out of school for a year. And when you do that, it just means that they are disappointed, anxious, getting depressed, getting angry. And that's not the world we want. If we want a different world, we're going to have to change it.
So, wow, there is so much to talk about, given what Henrietta has just said over the last 45 minutes. And I want to ask anybody who wants to make a comment, make a suggestion to UNICEF, or ask a question of Henrietta Fore, please just press the raise hand button. I'll call on you in order. But as people do that, Henrietta, my last question was going to ask where's the hope? But you just answered it. I mean, that answer gave me, and I was watching the faces on this Zoom screen, a lot of us hope that with a big vision and a lot of ambition, we around the world can really make progress. And I think that must be important for you because you're dealing with these tragedies and human misery in places like Myanmar and Tigray province and Yemen. I imagine this keeps you going, right?
It does. It's the big ideas that you need when you're a big platform and you're a big complex world. And this is one. Vaccine deliveries are another. Water, there's another one. Mental health worldwide. It's going to be an interesting issue. It's going to be essential. Young people want to talk about mental health. In secondary school, they feel it's the most important issue they want to talk about. I think it's true in college. I think it's true in graduate school. It's true for our age, Nick. I mean, it's going to be a major issue. There's some issues the world has been letting be silent, but now the world realizes it can't be. So we have big ideas, big dreams, and we need everyone on this call to come help.
Thank you, Henrietta. Let's go to questions. And I want to call on Izzy Ernst. Izzy is the co-chair, along with Aoibheann, our host today, who introduced you, of our Women in Development Diplomacy and Defense program, one of our major programs here. So, Izzy.
Thank you so much, Henrietta, for taking the time to talk to us. This has been absolutely fascinating. I have a question kind of taking us back to the global COVID vaccination campaign, which is obviously quite different to the vaccination campaigns that UNICEF is normally doing focused on children. And specifically, I'm curious, if we're looking at these really complex settings like Yemen, do you foresee a tension in terms of the priorities that really matter to people, which there will probably be hunger, the violence, and COVID-19 might not be very high up on the priority list for the people on the ground. How are you going to deal with that tension between the need of the international community to get the vaccine out and what's the actual need on the ground, and how is UNICEF going to navigate that?
So, Izzy, it's a really good point, and it is a difficult one. And you are right that there are many countries and there are many communities in countries that do not feel that COVID-19 is their number one issue. So they're dealing with drought, or they're dealing with a desert locust, or they're dealing with cholera, or they're dealing with famine. And you just don't put COVID at the top of the list. You just hope it won't come, and you don't know what it is because you've not seen anyone die of it, and therefore it doesn't seem very important. So sometimes we as a world have a desire for a country or a community that they don't have for themselves. So our job is to try to inform them and educate them about the risks and the concerns we see and how we think they could very simply get safety and help for it. But it's something that UNICEF does that we consider risk communication in communities. Communication is extremely important these days. In your next decades, you're going to have far more misinformation and mistrust of information than we had in our generations. And so this notion that you're bringing up, Izzy, is a very important one, and having the tools to address it is very important.
Thank you very much. Henrietta, I want to introduce you to Enzo Bollettino, who's director of the program on resilient communities at the Harvard Humanitarian Initiative. Enzo, you're next.
Thank you so much, Henrietta, for your presentation. I'm actually very fond of UNICEF, as it was the first place I got started on humanitarian issues in 1996 with an internship for the security coordinator at the time. My question for you is, could you speak a little bit about UNICEF's perspective on the localization of aid agenda, especially in light of some of the challenges that both conflict and now the pandemic present in accessing local communities, are local organizations, community-based organizations and NGOs better positioned to be able to respond to some of these things, and how does UNICEF view the localization of aid agenda? Thank you.
Enzo, thank you. And Enzo, thank you for starting with UNICEF. Great training. Send more Enzos to us. So localization, we believe in. It's really important. What people don't want anymore is for someone from another country to parachute in, spend 2 weeks with them, tell them what to do, and leave again. I mean, it's just not helpful. What they want is someone who can stay with them, work with them, and can see all of the issues that they have. So we were talking earlier with Erica about the Democratic Republic of Congo. So as we went around to ask if villages would accept coming in for Ebola testing, what they told us was, we will if you can give us something. So if you could give us a water faucet, we'd be willing to have you come in. But we won't if you won't, because we don't see the need in it. So all of it is related on the ground in the local community. And every village got ready with what they wanted to ask in exchange for having an Ebola health worker coming in. And that's important, because then their village leaders are with you. So the locals are very important. The puzzle now is that with so many conflicts going on, and they're longer and they're deadlier than they ever have been, many times the local healthcare workers are fleeing along with everyone else from the village. And so they all get separated and they get into various internal displacement camps. And then they've lost their groups. And when the children get separated, it's very hard to find where people have fled, because they don't all have cell phones on them to be able to find them. And the children, they can maybe remember the name of their town, maybe a parent's first name, but very hard to know more than that. And so how to keep these communities together is a real struggle, is becoming more difficult, and the local organizations are the most important. It's also true now that we are really working for women and girls on gender-based violence, on childhood marriage, on stopping female genital mutilation. Those local groups are the ones that do all of the work, are the ones that are trusted. So Enzo, without the local groups, we would not have as good a world, and they need strengthening, they need money, and they do not have time for the paperwork and the measurements that we give them. But we still give it to them because all of our donors need it. But it's hard on them. There's a lot of work ahead for them.
Thank you very much, Henrietta and Enzo. Bethany, you're next.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Burns. Good to be back. My name is Bethany Ellis. I'm an HKS alumni from 2019, and I currently serve as the advocacy officer for the Watch List on Children in Armed Conflicts. So working very frequently with our colleagues at UNICEF in New York. My question to you is for those of us who are working in the multilateral kind of advocacy space, what are the things that we can really target to help you continue to do your work, particularly on protection of children in conflict zones, during the pandemic. And we've seen some good movements in statements around support for the global ceasefire, including the resolution adopted last week on reiterating the call for the global ceasefire in order to get the vaccine distributed. But what more can we be doing to help ensure that those promises are being translated into real action to help you fulfill your mandate on the ground?
Well, Bethany, great to have you there. Thank you very much. And thank you for working on children in armed conflict. It is, as you know, a growing area. And we keep speaking about the fact that no one should be bombing the institutions that are needed. So children need schools, they need hospitals, they need clinics, they need water systems. And as a world, we just should realize that there are some parts of society that allow the civilian life to live. So raising your voice on that helps. Number two, I would continue to talk about child rights. The Convention on the Rights of the Child is an important document and has the right values in it that we all should believe in. And as a result, talking about it wherever you are in whatever country, it helps. And then third, the translation is often dependent on money, funding. And we do not get enough funding for protection. And we do not get enough funding for protection of children or of women. And as I mentioned earlier, mental health, growing area. It's just really starting to be noticed. So anything you can do to help on that, Bethany, most appreciated.
Thank you very much. Good to see you, Bethany. Welcome back to Harvard. Aoibheann, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, is a student at Harvard Medical School.
Exactly, that's the right way to pronounce my name. So I'm Aoibheann, and as I said, I'm at Harvard Medical School, but currently I'm in Rwanda. So it's great to hear about UNICEF because it's kind of personal in my life, because the very first notebook I got and the very first pen I used were the gift from UNICEF when I was in a refugee camp in Congo. And yesterday, Rwanda received a number of vaccine, and COVID is behind all of that. I have a question probably on behalf of refugees. We are hearing negotiations about access to vaccines being done at state level. And sometimes refugees are not the priorities of these states or these nations. So what arrangements do you have for refugees to access COVID-19 vaccines? Thank you.
So Aoibheann, great question, one that we've really been working hard on. And so let me address two areas that I think have been very helpful. So we have been asking every national government that anyone who lies within their national borders should be included in their vaccination plans equally with their own citizens. There are some countries that either cannot because they don't have the facilities or are not yet there in their policies. And so we have set aside a buffer supply that if they are not covered by others, that they can be covered by the COVAX facility. But our first hope is that all of them can be included in the national plans. And we've been working hard on the national plans with the World Bank, WHO, ourselves, and others in country. And Aoibheann, I'm glad you've made it to Harvard. That is a great story and very important for the world. And I hope that you head back to Africa because they need you.
Thank you, definitely. Thank you.
We have Aoibheann and then Pacifique.
Thank you. And thanks again, Henrietta, for being here today. I've really enjoyed all of your insights that you've shared and appreciate it. I have a question that circles back to a topic you mentioned briefly earlier, which is the tri-sector approach to humanitarian work. And a lot of the HKS students here are transitioning between public sector, private sector, nonprofit. And so I was wondering if you could just share some of your thoughts on what you've seen as some of the skills and insights that are transferable across those sectors, and then maybe any thoughts you have on the future for greater collaboration across the three in the humanitarian space.
Oh, Aoibheann, this is near and dear to my heart. So thank you. And I think you will need all of those. You'll need to be the tri-sector athletes. It's very clear that the world that lies ahead will be how you can put these pieces together. So what business gives you is a sense of time and money being extremely important and urgent. So it's speed, it's flexibility, the fact that there are IT systems that talk to each other within a company, that products have to come to market, that a customer has to want the product, that you can earn your own way, are very important concepts. When I look out at the development world, I can see that you can make a business out of maybe 75% of the projects, but we don't do that as a world. We keep them going as development programs with grant funding, and we never transition them into sustainable private businesses, but they're out there. So anyone who is graduating and heading out into the world, see if you can't take 5 or a dozen of these projects and make them good local businesses. And then they can support themselves, and there's a whole system to it. The world of governments, bilateral and multilateral, is much more consensual and is much more hierarchical. It is also based on general universal values in a way that business doesn't carry, but businesses now perking up to this with all the sustainable development goals and some of the big initiatives like climate change. So if you head into business, make sure that they are thinking of the broader world and the broader good, the common good. And there's a lot of good business in the common good. So find it and look for it and create it. And if they do, it's similar to what Enzo was talking about with local organizations. A big international NGO can take a local NGO under their wing. A big multinational corporation can take a local organization, a local business under its wing. And that's very important. So when you go out there, go find some locals that you can put under your wing so that they can see it. I think the world that where you all are going to be living in is going to be so much more connected, and it's going to have big universal platforms in a way we have not had in the past. And that is going to have to be the advantage that you bring to all of your work. That's one advantage. The second advantage that you've got to take control of is your generation, the demographics of your generation. Between the ages of 10 to 24 is the largest demographic bulge in the world, 1.8 billion young people in that age group. You need 10 million jobs a month for this age group. We don't have that. So couldn't they be participants in all of the programs that we have? Why do they have to be beneficiaries? They want to roll up their sleeves. They want to learn things to do. They can help in everything: climate change, nutrition, famines, water systems, mental health, education. They can do it all. So change the mentality. It's no longer donor recipient. It's rather equal partners. We're going to teach you gig work. We're going to teach you how to help your own communities and be entrepreneurs. And it will change the world. So that's just some initial thoughts.
Thank you very much. There's a lot more there to talk about, and this is reminiscent of some of the debates that Henrietta and I were involved in the U.S. government back 10, 15 years ago in trying to transition out of this environment where of grant aid towards sustainable projects. And that led to Millennium Challenge, and Henrietta directed all of that for the US government. So thank you for that. Pacifique and then Tori.
Thank you so much. I'm from Rwanda and I'm a student at Harvard Medical School, currently working with partners in health in Liberia in pharmaceutical supply chain management. Just to echo what Theogen said, I'm also among the witnesses of the impact of the work UNICEF and other humanitarian aid organizations are doing, because I was a refugee 27 years ago when I was a kid in Tanzania. We are grateful to UNICEF and other humanitarian aid organizations, and we feel the moral responsibility to give back, and especially to the international community. My question is about the supply chain, this task that UNICEF is handling, overseeing the procurement and distribution of COVID-19 vaccines. As we know, some of the low and middle income countries are not prepared to roll out the vaccination program due to different challenges, including lack of basic infrastructure like cold chain management, which is very important.
It's 6 o'clock.
For ensuring the safety and maintaining the quality of the vaccine. So how is UNICEF and the governments addressing that issue to make sure that it's not interfering with the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccines? Thank you.
Thank you, Pacifique. And you also are just one of these ideal students who know what it's like to be somewhere. And we do not yet have approval in Tanzania on many of the vaccines. So it is it's a challenge in many countries. Supply chain. We have solar powered fridges, little ones, that we currently use for storing vaccines for routine immunizations. But we have now gone through supply chains with every country, every receiving country, the low and lower middle income countries, to check their supply chain based on what they might need. So if they're ordering Pfizer, or if they're ordering Moderna or AstraZeneca, so that we know how that supply chain can work. The supply chain, since you are deeply involved in it, you know that we also are very concerned about expiry dates. So we are shipping in a just-in-time method out of our Copenhagen supply depot. So we ship a first dose, since we are right now shipping the 2-dose vaccines. We're shipping first dose, and then we're shipping second dose. And then in the one vaccine group, then we ship the one vaccine, but we don't ship in such volume that they cannot accept it. So we know the amount that can move through the supply chain. We know the quality of the supply chain, and then we've put in place some checks to make sure that as vaccinations are proceeding, that part of the supply chain is that we hear if anyone is having a negative reaction. We hope that there are no batches that are not perfect, but we have to be completely alert and aware that there can be problems in supply chains, which you know, and we have to catch it immediately. So some of it is local data, some of it is big data, some of it is predictive data. But we're going to learn a lot from this. But we're right now, those solar powered fridges are some of our best friends, and they work really well. And we think the supply chains are holding right now. So Thank you, and thank you for working on supply chains. It's a very important part of pharmaceuticals and often overlooked.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Pacifique. Rosalind Richardson has a question on chat, which is directly related, Henrietta, to what you just talked about. Rosalind, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us today, Ms. Fore. In traditionally harder to reach countries like island nations across the Caribbean and other remote areas, in addition to some of the conflict environments we talked about earlier, how might UNICEF utilize its COVID vaccination distribution campaign over the next year to sort of recommit those efforts on technological access and what may be low-tech learning environments in many of these states?
Yeah, so it's a very interesting question, Rosalind, and I don't really have an answer for you. The island nations have committed to wanting to reach all of the people on the island, and they want to have connectivity. So in the Caribbean, we have one of our co-chairs of Generation Unlimited is, you will see that on our website as an initiative for skilling young people and including education. They have said they want to be one of the first lead areas for connectivity by low Earth satellite. Satellites are very helpful for island nations. So the connectivity there, if we can get every school connected, it also means that we can get the health clinics connected that are also in the same neighborhood, in the same village. And it means that then their supply chains on COVID will help. But there are more people right now in many of the countries that want education to restart, the classrooms to reopen, than want to get a vaccine. But we want both. And we want teachers to be able to be in the front lines of who gets vaccinated. And we want schools to reopen safely. So it's a very interesting puzzle. Any suggestions or ideas on how we might do this would be very welcome, because some of the populations are quite remote and difficult to access. We're now using drones for delivery of some of our pharmaceuticals because, you know, it's mountainous, or like Vanuatu is one of the places we did it. But one of our big drone corridors is in Kazakhstan. So it can work in a variety of places, but delivery, acceptance, connectivity, it's all coming, and it's going to be sped up during the time of COVID. So we want to emerge from this time stronger rather than weaker as a world. And to do so, this is a very important area. So Rosalind, send your ideas.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosalind. Before I go to Tori, who has a question linking climate change to what you're doing, there's a related question in the chat from Priscilla Walker about the lack of access by Palestinians to vaccination. And Priscilla, if you want to ask that question, I think now would be a very good time to do that. If you're still here, Priscilla, or if you're unmuted. Well, let me ask the question, Henrietta. I think you know the issue that Priscilla is referring to, that Israel is vaccinating its entire population with a great deal of efficiency and success, but very few Palestinians have been vaccinated, and there's not yet a complete commitment by the Israeli government to do so. In a situation like this, and that's a conflict area, does the United Nations, does UNICEF step in? Are you conducting programs in the West Bank and Gaza? What should Palestinians do to get access to the vaccine?
Usually we work with the host country government to vaccinate and to get vaccines out to all of their healthcare centers, and that it is owned by the national government, and we're there to assist. We're there to help. We're walking by their side with supplies and training and communications and all of that. There are times and places in which the national governments just are not covering certain parts of their their populations. And this is similar to the refugee issue or internally displaced people. So we want everyone to be covered. We are talking privately and publicly to everyone involved and hoping that we can get some good breakthroughs in many of these situations so that all of the people can get vaccinated. Every individual needs a vaccination. You know, children will be probably the last because we have not yet done the tests on the children, but it does not mean that they are immune to the disease. So we want to reach everyone, and we're working hard on it, Nick. And if Priscilla has any suggestions or ideas of anyone that we should be connected with, we're glad to do so. We are hard at work on the ground, United UNRWA and UNICEF and many other organizations, WHO, et cetera. So we're all working on it, but any ideas are always welcome.
Thank you very much. And I think I would editorialize just a bit. We had a seminar this morning on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict with a lot of our students, Erica and I. And it's certainly good to see the United States under President Biden's leadership recommit to UNRWA, recommit to US financing of the Palestinian refugee camps in the West Bank and Gaza, in Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and recommit to our own bilateral economic assistance program for Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, which the United States has had going back to the 1970s, but it had been sundered, cut off over the last 4 years. So I think we're in a much better place, I hope, the United States government to be helpful in this process. Tori Tausig.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you, Henrietta, for this conversation. It's been really inspirational, and I can say in my household, I've grown up learning about these issues. My mom has worked for Save the Children for over 25 years, and so I'm constantly in awe of the work that your organizations do. So I wanted to ask you about climate change, because it's this massive problem that we're all facing. Sorry, I'm going to turn my camera off in case my connection is unstable. But we don't often hear about the impacts that climate change has on children when we talk about climate change in political conversations. And so I wanted to hear from you kind of the main ways you see climate change impacting children, and also how climate change has affected your priority issues at UNICEF that you're focusing on over the next few years. Thank you.
Thank you, Tori. 3 cheers for your mother, and I'm glad you're following with interest in her footsteps. Children, it's interesting. Children and young people have really been leading the climate change, and they care about it. And so involving them, back to what Nick and I were talking about earlier, making sure that they're participants is going to be extremely important, because sometimes we get carried away that it's all about policy, and it isn't for them. They want to do something about it on the ground. So for UNICEF, how we are moving climate change in, we focus on air, water, and land. Air is actually a very interesting area for children, because if there's too much pollution in the air, let us take India at a certain time of the year, or Mongolia, which has environmental issues because of the coal and the heat. Children's brains and bodies can not develop healthily. And so air quality is very important. And so then you say to yourself, well, what can a young person do about air quality? It's up there, it's out there. But some have started with little air quality monitors on the top of their schoolhouses. And as classes, they monitor it, they talk to the government about it, they start advocating in their communities about air quality and what they can see that needs changing. And that makes a difference. It brings awareness and interest. When I was in Nepal, some of the secondary schools have a program in which you, in your class, you go out and you walk around the neighborhood and you identify environmental problems that could either be caused by some version of climate change, or maybe it's the local restaurant who puts their trash out next to the water supply, and the trash then gets into the water supply and sullies the water supply. But they become neighborhood monitors that if you are doing something that is not good environmentally, they're going to help you. So they talk to the local shopkeepers, and they talk to the restaurant owners, they talk to the households, they keep lists of what's going right and what's going wrong in their neighborhood. And it makes them aware, and it makes their communities aware, because these are their children. And so the children then begin talking to their parents about it. They learn about what they could be doing. And then water, because water is now a major issue for us. We have a 4-pronged program. The first is that we want to have water be affordable and accessible in all communities. It's not, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa. The second is we want it to be climate resilient. So when I was in Mozambique after Hurricane Ida, and I went to Beira, which is a town on the peninsula, and we would look over at Buzi town, which was completely inundated. The entire town was lost under the water, and the people, very few knew how to swim, lost. Mozambique meant that normal services had to be adjusted for all the salt water coming in, and that it's not getting into the water systems that the communities are using to drink with. So climate resilience, extremely important. The third area is that we now have too much water scarcity. The Sahel is a major area here. It's creating conflict between the herders and the farmers, but we also see it with the water tables in Yemen, the Jordan River Valley. I mean, the water tables are getting so low that the salinity and the minerals that are in it are often making it unhealthy for drinking if you can get any water at all. So scarcity, very important. And then the fourth area is that water can be an instrument of peace in a community. Social cohesion is now an issue that the world is going to have to grapple with. And you all as diplomats and development, social cohesion is a major issue, and your help in this would be great. We think women can be powerful in this. So in the peace negotiations around water and how you utilize water in your communities, we think can be powerful in the years to come. So those are at least 4 of our areas, Tori, and any areas that you can help us on, we would love the help. We do not get funded very well in climate change as UNICEF. So we're trying to tap into green bonds, but we're not yet approved. It's a very long process. We've been at it for 2 years, and I don't know when we're going to get out of it, but we need funding, and people instead will fund other entities. But the young people want it so much that we're on it, whether we're funded for it or not. We'll just hope for big public-private partnerships to help us.
Henrietta, this is so fascinating. And that last answer was just one in a series of fascinating responses from you. I know we've taken a lot of your time. Do you have 2 more minutes for one last question?
I'm all yours, Nick.
Here's the question. Professor Nicholas Christakis of Yale is a sociologist, wrote an utterly fascinating Wall Street Journal article at the end of 2020 in which he tried to look ahead post-pandemic based on what we know happened to other societies in the past. He looked at the Black Death, what happened to Europe after the Black Death. He looked at the 1920s, which of course followed the great influenza of 1918-19, periods of profound social change. People were compelled in both historical instances to look inside themselves, individually and collectively, to reinvent those parts of our societies that clearly had failed us during the pandemic itself. Periods of liberation from the curse of a pandemic, the anxiety of a pandemic. He's turning this into a book that is just now being published. And I was so taken by this article, I had my class last semester read it, but it connects with the last question, which is from Rajratna Sardar, who's been here. And Raj said in the chat, what lessons do you think we humans need to learn? This is a big question. From the pandemic, what have you learned? And how do we become more resilient as a human community to meet these lessons?
It is a big question, but it's a question I love. So let me just start with it. And if we can ever continue, I'm all in. One area I think we learned that we did not want to learn is that there is so much violence in households, both physical and sexual, that we have to have as a world an emphasis on stopping domestic violence. It has gotten worse when some member of the household loses a job and there's no economic income, but it is the children who absorb it like little sponges in the family, and often they either watch the beatings or they are the ones that are beaten, and the sexual violence is very strong. It is the dark side of what we have found. We've also found online violence. Predators online have increased multiple fold. And we as a world have to be able to educate children and young people about how to find trusted resources, how to work online because it's going to be part of their world, and to not be taken advantage of. So that's a dark area that we have learned, and I wish we weren't, but we are. The second area I think we have now learned is that mental health is a major issue. My generation didn't talk about it. We were afraid to mention it to a boss or to a spouse or anybody. They think they want to commit you to some place that you didn't want to go. And this generation feels it's okay, they're right, and we have to talk to them. So, and there are going to be a lot of mental health problems. It's going to be with this generation, just like the Depression, just like World War I and World War II. My father was in World War I, and so he lived through the Spanish flu. He was born in 1901. He went off to war at age 16, and he saw the war, and he came back never wanting to see a war again. And he just, he could see, he drove an ambulance. He could see that there wasn't the healthcare that you needed. I think our world thought we were more advanced in healthcare than we are. We have very fragile systems. The fact that we do not have water and a bar of soap at 40% of the schools, hospitals, and clinics in sub-Saharan Africa should make our world stop and say, well, let's change that. We can change that. On the good side, we have learned that we can adapt in our offices to online, in our educational institutions to online. But we're at the birth of an industry. How do we do that? How do we make sure that there's quality learning? How will artificial intelligence help us with that? What about disabled young? How can they learn? How are we reaching every individual person so that they can learn? It's a nascent industry. It is going to be public and private. I think it's going to be the most exciting area that you're going to see in your lifetimes. But it's a fascinating issue, Raj. And then lastly, may I say that our parenting hubs have gone off the charts in terms of use. I think parents now realize how important their families are. They don't leave them in the morning and then not see them until after the children are asleep at night. They're with them every hour of the day. And they realize that maybe they're not a perfect parent, and they want to learn about it. And so a lot of people are coming online and they are learning about what it's like to be a good parent. And that will help our world.
Thank you so much.
Raj, thank you for that really good question that you posed in chat. We have to bring this to an end, but I think we should invite Henrietta Fore back to the Harvard Kennedy School. I'm not just saying this because we're close friends. That was a fascinating hour and 27 minutes. You gave us a lot to think about the huge need out there in the world, the multiple crises that require all of us to be pulling on the same oar. And that means that especially for Americans who often kind of disregard, even diminish the United Nations system, despite the fact that we're the host country, we need to recommit to UNICEF. And the other agencies of the UN, the UNDP, for instance, which is doing such great work around the world. I take that away from this conversation. I take away from the conversation, Henrietta, what it means to be a powerful woman and the example of a woman as a leader. And we need that at our school. We need it in our societies. And you are one such example. And so that's been striking to me today. And because our school believes that every woman and every man at some point in their life should be in service, in public service. Your whole life has been in service. And so we thank you for that. And thank you for the example of public service. You keep diving into impossible situations and you do a great job managing in each of these really difficult jobs that you've had over the last 20 years. And finally, Eric and I were going to ask you about hope. You know, give us hope. I think the entire presentation, there were harrowing parts of it and difficult parts of it in terms of the issues you're struggling with, but you gave us hope. So Henrietta, thank you. And I'm going to ask everybody to unmute and just join me in thanking Henrietta Fore for being at Harvard today virtually.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to come to Harvard, and I was delighted to join you. So thank you very much.
Please come to the Cambridge, Massachusetts version of Harvard next autumn. Well, we're all going to be back on campus, we hope. And we will welcome you then, Henrietta, and all best to you and the men and women of UNICEF for what you're doing.
All right. Thank you very much, Nick. Thank you, everyone. People are the most important part of anything. So you're the ones that will carry it. Thank you.
Thank you.